The Hungry Valley. The smoke never stopped rising from the Harwick family smokehouse, a constant gray thread against the rugged Blue Ridge sky, even during the months when no livestock could be seen grazing on their land. This is not a tale of ghosts, but of the brutal calculus of survival, a story of what blooms in the deep isolation of the American wilderness, when vengeance is the only currency left. The year was 1847. And the mountains of western Virginia kept their secrets buried in mist-shrouded hollows, far from the concerned gaze of civilized society. In a valley so remote, the nearest settlement was a day's hard ride through treacherous passes. The Harwick homestead festered like a wound upon the land. The very air around the property spoke of a harsh existence, carved from an unforgiving earth. The groan of wagon wheels on rocky ground, the sharp scent of wood smoke laced with something vaguely sweeter, the rough-hewn logs of the main house, all testified to the grim determination of the family within. Marcus Harwick had built his fortune on three pillars: potent moonshine, extreme isolation, and the brutal institution of human bondage. While the plantation system flourished on the fertile plains, Harwick saw his opportunity in the lawless mountains, where federal eyes seldom wandered. His domain sprawled across 2,000 acres of dense forest, a fortress accessible only by a single, cunningly hidden trail. In 1843, Harwick had purchased 6 enslaved people from a failing tobacco plantation: Samuel, a skilled carpenter of 28, his wife Ruth, 26, their children Moses and Sarah, aged 12 and 8, and 2 other men, Joshua and Thomas, both in their 30s. Their journey to the mountains was a 2-week ordeal in iron shackles, a transaction that raised no eyebrows at the secluded way stations Harwick frequented. They arrived in the biting cold of late autumn, just as the first snows began to dust the peaks. But this was no ordinary plantation. There were no vast fields of cotton or tobacco, only steep slopes suitable for corn, and the hidden, illicit operation of a corn whiskey distillery, concealed within a natural cave system behind the main house. Marcus, his wife Eleanor, and their 3 grown sons, David, William, and James, had built their empire on this potent moonshine, trading it for gold and goods with men who asked no questions. The enslaved workers faced conditions that made a traditional plantation seem merciful. Winter temperatures plunged below 0, yet they lived in a single, drafty log structure, gaps between the boards wide enough to watch the world through. They manned the dangerous distillery, hauled water from frozen streams, and maintained the secret trails that kept the law at bay. Samuel, a natural leader, watched and learned. Ruth cooked and sewed. Their children helped where they could. Joshua and Thomas adapted to the brutal demands. Together, they formed a community bound by shared suffering and a deepening understanding of their hopeless isolation. The Harwicks ruled with casual cruelty. Eleanor, no gentle Southern belle, kept a leather whip by her kitchen door. David, the eldest son, delighted in inventing new torments. William and James followed without question. The smokehouse was the heart of the property's survival, a sturdy building of stone and thick oak where meat was preserved for the long winters: deer, bear, wild boar, the occasional traded pig. But something ancient and dark lived in those mountains. The Cherokee, forced out a decade prior, had left behind stories of a hungry valley, a cursed place where the spirits of the dead could find no peace. By the winter of 1846, the tension was a taut wire ready to snap. Samuel began his quiet observations, noting keys, routines, and vulnerabilities. The Harwicks, arrogant in their isolation, had grown careless. The smokehouse, with its butchering tools and slightly removed location, became central to Samuel's thoughts. He did not know that the Harwicks were watching him in return, noting his whispered conversations and his testing of locks. The confrontation was inevitable, a storm gathering in the hollow that would transform it into something far more terrifying than any ghost story. It would be a place where justice would be meted out with the very tools used to preserve life, and the smoke would carry secrets for generations. But first, someone had to die. The dogs fell silent at 11:43 on the night of February 14, 1847. On a night so cold the air itself seemed to crackle, when ice frosted the smokehouse windows, the Harwick family made a decision that would seal their fate. The crunch of boots on frozen snow, the metallic scent of fear, the rough hemp rope coiled in David's hand, all pointed to an execution. Marcus had found Samuel's escape plan: a hidden cache of supplies, a stolen compass, a hand-drawn map. The evidence lay on the kitchen table like a death sentence. "Should have done this years ago," Eleanor muttered, sharpening a butcher's knife with methodical strokes. "Your father's always been too merciful." David nodded toward the dark smokehouse. "We'll hang the carpenter first. The others will fall in line." The plan was simple. Drag Samuel out, force the others to watch him swing from the smokehouse rafters, leave his body as a grisly reminder. But Samuel had not been planning mere escape. He had been preparing for war. He had listened to the old Cherokee stories, learning how to use the terrain and the weather as weapons. He knew that people with nothing left to lose could achieve the impossible. Through the thin walls, Samuel and the others heard every word of the family's grim discussion. By the time Marcus finished, they were already enacting their own plan. Ruth knew Eleanor always checked the smokehouse fires before bed. Joshua and Thomas had tested the strength of the meat hooks. Young Moses knew the family's sleeping arrangements by heart. The bitter cold worked in their favor, making metal brittle and ground hard. The dogs were brought inside for warmth. At midnight, Samuel slipped out. He reached the smokehouse before Eleanor, hiding in the shadows among the hanging meat. The others joined him, a silent, determined assembly. Eleanor appeared on schedule, a torch in one hand, a poker in the other. She never saw Samuel's hands until they closed around her throat. What happened in the next minutes would forever change 6 people from victims into something else entirely. The tools of butchery were about to serve a new, terrifying purpose. Eleanor's torch hit the floor and died, and in the bloody darkness, 4 years of planning met a raw, desperate need for justice. The struggle was short, but it rewrote the rules of survival in those mountains. Samuel held Eleanor, his carpenter's grip crushing, his voice a low whisper recounting 4 years of brutality. Thomas selected a fillet knife, its blade sharp enough for surgery. As Joshua held her, Samuel allowed her one ragged breath, enough to see the hooks, the tables, the tools that would now be turned upon their master. The Cherokee believed you could consume an enemy's power, and in that cold, isolated place, civilized notions fell away, leaving something older and far more absolute. The Hungry Valley was about to be fed.